I've come to the realization that the media doesn't just want to keep you poor. They want you to be miserable. And I didn't even notice this myself, but I just felt that my mindset was getting a bit negative. Kind of somewhere between apathy and mild despair. I was noticing that it was impacting not only how I felt about the world, but also it made me do one thing, which I know to my core I need to be, which is a long-term patient investor. It made that way more difficult the more I watched the news. And I've seen this through clients, and I am convinced that if you don't monitor this, you could have a mentality developed which could be totally toxic to your long-term wealth. And I'm not sure if you've noticed this as well, but right now sentiment's a little bit bleak. As I write this, the Bank of England is predicting a pretty slow economy. We've seen inflation cause our bills skyrocketing last year, conflict overseas, and social media feeds which are always somewhere between chaos, anger and Armageddon. Surely in this light, even the most steadfast of views, the most optimistic, must be feeling a bit doubtful.
Wider panic, more economic pain and potentially more defaults,
yes,
risking contagion.
Gratifiers. Do better over the long pull.
If you can detach yourself temperamentally from the crowd, you get very rich.
Because I'm going to tell you how you can solve this yourself, which involves a story about Tony Hawk's skateboarding games. Hold on for that. And let me just tell you about a little experiment that I tried. So I started a little experiment to see how much of my waking hours were made up by some form of news consumption. Here were my stats. 20 minutes in the morning when trying to wake up, drinking coffee and, kind of get ready for the day. 15 minutes at lunch. Typically I'd be flicking through either the news feeds or something on my phone while I'm eating, or maybe even I might have the news on the background depending on where I'm working. And then 25 minutes at least through various points in micro segments across the day, whether it's going to meetings and getting radio updates in between music, or maybe on public transport trying to be productive but not immune to the barrage of notifications and urgent news events. And this is also discounting the regular unscheduled pickups of my phone. I use an app now to block out social media during the day, but even so, if I'm honest with myself, the screen time is horrific. Do this yourself. I don't know on the other phones, but on the iPhone, just search screen time and then realize what a pathetic little gadget obsessed weirdo you are. Am I projecting? No, I'm sure it's fine. Anyway, when I filter for news or news media, that takes me to kind of like a round and highly generalized hour a day, which I think, intentionally done or not, is probably about accurate. Reframed, that is about 6.25% of normal waking hours devoted entirely to taking in current events. That's over 15 whole days of every year to that ritual. How unusual am I? Ask yourself, if you totaled the notifications, the doom scrolling, the time in between meetings, waking up in the morning, relaxing at night, with this on the background, are you that different? Well, there's a huge problem with that, and that is, this. I'm not suggesting we embark on a new dark ages where we hide from our reality and what's going on. I'm just asking the question, how much is too much? The challenge with life is that simple heuristics and headlines don't explain a complex world. We have to be honest with ourselves about the incentives here. Everyone has an incentive. Me, you, the news channels, and the news channels, they need your attention. At the end of the day, they're all getting displaced by social media and they need eyeballs so they can sell ads. If they don't, they still are judged on eyeballs. It's not that, in my view, they want you to be poor or make bad investment decisions. It's just that they want your attention. And guess what? Panic is the best way to do this. It really is negative events world service. See what I did there? And that kind of leads us to a very murky place, because YouTube is exactly the same. And even I, gotta be honest with you, I've had to try and think of ways to use this type of attention grabbing stuff to my advantage, because it's all about the clicks. It would be far easier for me to put out a video saying, it's the end of the world, act now, than it is to promote strategic long-term investing, which is actually going to help most of you out there. And it's quite tricky because kind of got to play a bit of a sort of Trojan horse game where you try and put a helpful message in something that's going to get people's attention. Because let's face it, by the way, I'm incredibly grateful for every single person that watches this channel, because you've made this decision to watch this when given the choice of news channels, social feeds, multi-billion funded streaming service. Really? I'm not judging you. I'm also judging you. No, I'm not judging you. Thank you. The point I'm trying to make is that it is really difficult to try and keep attention in this day and age. Me, you, everyone. We just have to try and be aware of we're trying to get manipulated in many ways so that that attention goes to whatever the source may be. And central media, they're exactly the same.
So look, my aim at the end of the day, it's not just to be a poor man's James Sharp. It's to try and be educational and have like a positive impact. And even though sometimes I might do it better than other times. But in fact, all YouTube creators investors know this. And this is just why I'm constantly trying to churn out videos about crashes and panics. You know, it's cynical, it's annoying, but most of all, it's effective. You know, the way I try and think about it is I have to accept my brain is going to be for very good reasons, wired to look out for risks, and in a more exaggerated way than it is to accept reason. So I try and counteract that, you know, without going the other way and just becoming blindly optimistic. All this can be true at the same time, depending on your mindset and where you look. This is to borrow from Our World and Data. You know, the world is awful, the world is much better, and the world can be much better. And in many ways, objective reality kind of sits in the middle here. So this is kind of why I like to think we need to be careful and understand what is sort of the pragmatism of optimism. You know, we have to try and be stoic to the reality that you do not exist as an economic forecast. And just being optimistic doesn't mean things will be better. You know, no one can predict that. But if we consider this carefully, and I plagiarized this from Morgan Housel, there are some really clear reasons, in my view, why we should be optimistic. At the end of the day, we can only control our own individual situations and do what we can for others. You know, we can't influence global events, and we shouldn't pretend that we can try. We can, however, control our mindset when faced with this to be more useful, to be better investors, and just better people. And on a wider scale, you know, we don't have to look far back to see the evidence of overcoming odds that most would have predicted being catastrophic, like perhaps when we pulled the entire economy off the rails for a few months as we did in 2020. History really is one damn thing after another, and I have no doubt that in the next 30 to 40 years, they're going to be littered with crises and events which feel like the end of the world. But I also believe that people are incredibly resilient and resourceful when they're required to be. After all, the greatest challenges often spur the greatest innovations. The invention and development of radar, computers, and penicillin, they were all inventions born out of conflict. So they say great businesses are made in these crises. So let me tell you about Tony Hawk, and you'll probably know him. I used to play the game on PlayStation, which sold like 1 million copies. He got famous by landing a 900-degree spin, which was incredible at the time. It was a seriously big deal. Have a look at this.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, look at this.
Today, a 7-year-old managed it. The point of this is just to say that human progress is really difficult to grasp, but it's constant. This is happening all the time, and it can be seen in the quality of our sports, whether it's Premier League footballers or athletics. Things move on so much each generation, and that knowledge compounds, and things do generally get better, and business is no different. You know, the companies of today are doing things which would be unthinkable for early generations, and the need to add value, the need to build something. You know, nothing has changed here. If anything, the market's even more competitive than it used to be. And with that in mind, it's difficult to think how that driving force is going to stop. All right, look, I know you might be thinking, it's all right for you, annoying financial advisor, but you're not thinking about this reason and that reason. And fine, look, I get it. You may be right and I might be wrong. I just think that health and wealth are two elements of life that no one can opt out of. So I think it's reason to think about making sure that each element of our decision making and the lifestyle we lead around that is as good as it can be. What I do know is that separating those who are financially successful from those who are failed investors is their ability to stay in their seats when things get scary. The market has always climbed a wall of worry, and it will today and it will going forward. So it may be controversial, it may be countercultural, but the big picture is things really are getting better and they will continue to. Stick to the plan, stay in your seat. To your future.